So here we are. This is Jon Croft with Rebecca Croft with Culture Warfare with Jon Croft. And I am Jon Croft. How is everybody doing?
Hi, Jon Croft.
Hey, Rebecca, how are you?
I'm great. Today's Valentine's Day.
Yay, St.
Happy,
Valentine.
yeah, happy Valentine's Day.
Good job to you, sir. May you never lose your head again.
Teach us to love like you do.
That's right. You know, St. Valentine didn't mind losing his head because he had already lost his head being in love with Jesus. What the?
I love that. He knew who the real head was. He didn't need his own head.
He was already beheaded,
He
right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
He was beheaded by the head.
Didn't hurt. And he'd already been through that, you know.
So give us a quick synopsis about Saint Valentine. What's
Oh,
his story?
yes. For those of you who cannot go to Wikipedia, no, we love you guys too. And of course, happy Valentine's to all of you folks. But and it's about love, right? But it's about love in the Christian world, especially because Saint Valentine was a man of God who lived during the Roman Empire days, and he married people, Christians and soldiers and people who were not supposed to marry. The Romans didn't like the stuff the Christians were doing, including marrying people that were not authorized to be married. So he married them anyway and did it, and then he got in trouble for it, and then did it in secret, and then was found out doing it in secret, marrying these people off. He's a like a pastor sort of thing, right? They didn't call him pastors back then, but he was a
He
man of
was
the
a bishop.
church. He did that, and then they beheaded him for it. And but after that, he of course defeated those terrible laws, similarly to how Saint George defeated pagan Rome. So that's just how it works. The snake strikes your heel, and you crush its head. That's how it works.
Yes, you do.
As we follow in his footsteps, that's what happens. So so praise God.
Yeah, that's awesome. What were people not allowed to get married because what like who were these people that were not allowed to get married? Were they were Christians?
Yes, and it had something to do with the military as well because they had special rules for the military in Rome. And so Roman society was a little different than ours. They had rules for different people of different classes of society, you know, and they took special care of their own Roman soldiers. And sometimes that means special rules for you. But yeah, he was just a person to say that love was important enough to die for. So he would marry people off so they wouldn't sin and fall into sin, because that's what Christians would rather do, right? We would rather get married rather than fall into some kind of adulterous relationship. And and then we stay faithful, just like we're faithful to Christ. So Christ is the example of holy matrimony to us as he's married the church. And so that's why we do what we do when we get married. That's why we have a great ceremony. It represents the ceremony of the church with Christ in heaven. And it's just a beautiful, that's why it's supposed to be a beautiful thing. And that's why the bride wears white, because his church is perfectly cleansed by Christ. That's what it represents. Something to show off, right?
Amen.
Amen. So
Christians be getting married.
that's right. That's right. Not afraid of making commitments. This is part of growing up, little kids, part of growing up. You stop getting afraid of making commitments. Of course, they're lifelong commitments. You're an adult. That's what adults do. Adults go adulting. We conquer things. We take over because we're responsible human beings. That's how it works. So, that's how you build civilization, man. You make lifelong commitments. You're willing to give your life for something bigger than yourself. That's what St. Valentine's did. And that's why we celebrate him. So good job adulting, St. Valentine.
We did our part. We got married.
That's right. Well, I'm happy nobody has to die. Christ already did. St. Valentine already did. Nobody else has to. Thank God.
So, so
Yeah.
what media have you been experiencing this week, John?
Oh, yes. Good question. Since we've been working on Media Moses Weekly and getting it as going as a show, not just an article, because on MediaMoses.com, we write articles about entertainment news and such. And we have this newfangled thing called Media Moses Weekly. It's been kind of been around a while. It's an article thing, right? Or it's a weekly roundup of articles. And we're turning it into a show called, of course, Media Moses Weekly. And it basically does the same thing except in video form. So we've been working on that, and in the process, let's see, I can share. Okay, so here's Media Moses, and our three articles this week are Unbreakable Boy.
The Unbreakable Boy.
Yeah. So finally, The Unbreakable Boy comes to theaters after Lionsgate delayed its release for years. Yeah, they delayed the release of Unbreakable Boy for 4 years. But now that they're coming out February 21st, it's going to be going up against Dogman and Paddington in Peru. Paddington, it's coming out tonight, and Dogman was already out, but it had been doing gangbusters. So yeah, and now it's got to go. This family film is got to go against two animated family films. Who knows if it's gonna do well? I think it'll probably do fine. But on this article, we talk about how the movie was delayed for 4 years. It actually was made before during the COVID protocols,
Oh, wow.
and it was also made before American Underdog. So it says moving forward with such projects can be like watching miracles happen. This film is no exception. It was filmed during the 2020 COVID protocols for film in and around Oklahoma, a state which proved itself to Gunn, the director, as worthy state for faith-based film. So much so that he came back less than a year later for the Kurt Warner story, American Underdog. So he filmed that movie after Unbreakable Boy, and that got released 4 years ago. So the
Oh,
film he
wow.
shot after Unbreakable Boy already got released, and other films as well before Lionsgate even decided to push it to 2025. And so this time last year, they actually announced it that it would be coming out, and it would be coming out February 21st, 2025. Thank God. And so Unbreakable Boy is now coming out next week, and we'll see if it does well. It's kind of, in a way, an origin story of what happened with the Kingdom Story Company as they started out, which is the Irwin Brothers, one of the Irwin Brothers production companies. The other is Wonder Project, which we've talked about a little bit before. So that's on Media Moses. Also, Robbie Starbucks, The War on Children, previously shunned, now available on Prime Video. So
Oh,
The War on Children is very controversial documentary by Robbie Starbuck, and it's finally coming to Amazon Prime Video. when previously you couldn't find it barely anywhere. It was on Rumble, it was on X, and you could find it on their site as well. They had their own site. But
Wow,
it's,
so another human trafficking film.
yes, another human trafficking film with also about transitioning. It's very controversial. I mean, this is a lot of people might think, oh, it's not a big deal for Amazon to do this, but that's like putting a Daily Wire project out on Amazon. That's a pretty big deal. So I was surprised that they did that, and we have another article actually we put out for that when it came out. So these kinds of films had been shunned, and if you remember, social media was very hesitant to even allow discussion on this kind of stuff. So we're thankful that these guys are able to put their stuff on Amazon now, and hopefully it'll make a few bucks and make their budget back. Hopefully, we'll see.
Yeah.
And let's see another story this week. Van Morrison's music company demonstrates immense profitability for some reason. And I say that because I'm being kind of funny here because if you go to the article that the Irish Mirror puts out, they act like they have no idea why they're sitting on 20 million euro of cash. They act like it's some weird thing. And which is really funny because all you have to do is do a modicum of research to realize why this is. I might as well read some of this because some people might not know in the US about what went on over there. Is it often that an old classic rocker like Morrison continues to tour and garner immense profit, close to 20 million euro, regardless of changes in the marketplace? Not necessarily. Radio hits used to just rake in profits continually due to contracts with numerous radio networks that made money just by existing. But now this isn't a shoe-in. Radio isn't necessarily doing lucrative business the way they used to, and MP3 distribution platforms likewise haven't necessarily created easy pipelines for artists to thrive either. Typically, they have to do additional work like soundtracks, retreads of their work, or to go on tour. This additional investment requires a latent fan base that's still willing to shell out cash. This does not always happen for artists. It often takes a marketing push of millions of dollars to plow the fields, make them ready for seed. So, regardless of this Irish Mirror article, which seems to leave out the most important data here, Morrison is apparently flush with cash somehow. And yet, had the Irish Mirror done any research on why this might be, they would uncover in the same sweat breaking effort it takes to type that Van Morrison, like Eric Clapton, were some of the few UK artists that spoke up against the vaccine mandates and put on entire concerts, sure, playing their standards, but also playing new hits such as Dangerous, What's It Gonna Take, Damage and Recovery, Not Seeking Approval, Money from America. Sometimes it's just blah, blah, blah. And especially Fighting Back is the new normal and can't go on this way. This was all from the socially conscious, freedom inspired, and counterculture What's It Gonna Take album, along with the latest record project, Volume 1, which was far from the generic album it sounded like. These albums from the midst of the pandemic period challenged politicians, the media, and government cronies that threatened to shut him up and harm many more people than they did, had people like Morrison not stood up. So you can go to the album here on Spotify called What's It Gonna Take? It's really great. Um, I mean, Morrison's stuff is just timeless anyway. Even in his more recent new arrangements and duets album, Morrison sings alongside heavies like Willie Nelson about not believing what's in the papers and on TV, at least not anymore the way they used to. This is just one example of many, the subtle messaging and sometimes not so subtle that he introduced since the 2020 pandemic about refusing to be controlled by establishment media and not doing whatever you're told. People can pretend that it didn't have an impact and that the nonconformity didn't matter, but they are dead wrong, just as the people who died know it now, and they know it just as well. And surprise, it's not just the mainstream media that minimizes Morrison, but fellow rockers who have a certain political stance to take. Here's a video on Bruce Springsteen supposedly criticizing Morrison for his politics. The video is incredibly biased, even taking swipes at his family relationships. It's actually kind of silly. These nonsense thoughts take nothing from Morrison's brilliance. Van Morrison's songs stand as a constant reminder that injustice continues to reign if we do nothing about it. Letting people do as they may is likewise not a solution, but you have to be willing to be used by truth as though a vessel of righteousness in the world to those who have closed their hearts to God and to goodness. And the Irish Mirror, like many other media suckers, is so busy writing useless and fake news that they fail to hold that mirror up to themselves. Such a sad fate for so many once beautiful media outlets. The Mirror got their fodder for the masses ready, and they're going to remain as useless as their masters desire it. Morrison says no, and so he has been rewarded for it. I put here the song Fodder for the Masses, which is about outlets like the Irish Mirror. And here's Clapton and Morrison's Stand and Deliver, which is also a good song by theirs. And a video of him working with Bob Dylan. And I mean, the dude's a legend. Legend. The guy is still putting out albums like every year, like clockwork. I mean, his blues is perfect. And the guy is uncompromising. Is that a bad thing? I guess for some people. Yeah, so that was my three big articles this week on Media Moses.
Awesome.
Yeah, but there is an even bigger thing we did this week, didn't we, honey?
We watched
Yes,
something.
we did. Our kids loved it. We loved it too. It was Gabriel and the Guardians, right?
Oh man.
Oh my goodness, it was so good. I have to show the trailer or something. Here we go.
Yeah.
Oh no, this is not the trailer. This is actually the intro. It's even better than the trailer. I think the intro is so good. Let's watch it.
What?
Oh yeah. Wasn't that great?
It was so good. It was so much fun.
It was really good. I mean, that is, and sure, while that intro rocks, I mean, it's incredible, but also the characters are great. The
Yeah.
first we got to see the first episode, which is up on angel.com for members. It's not for the general public yet, but it's for guild members, and it's just incredible. It's just so good. It's so like an 80s show, except with a little bit of extra coolness to it. It's got talking about the Nephilim and talking about stuff, but it's perfectly fine for kids. I was really surprised that it was just really, and it even said, I even think it said 13 and up, didn't it?
It's geared towards that age.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
But I mean, I didn't see anything that was inappropriate I mean,
no.
our younger kids are boys, so maybe that's why.
I
But
wouldn't call it like PG-13 or anything like that. It was
no, not at all.
there were some characters that were a little bit scary, but it was like
Yes.
anime scary, if that helps anybody.
Well, mild anime. I mean, very mild anime.
Yeah.
Kind of like the bad guys are big guys with big masks, but the masks are not that scary. Um, and like they do crafty things, like actually one character like basically loses his arm, but then it's like vines grow out of it. There's nothing like blood. It's very magical almost. It's kind of like pre-Diluvian Bible stories with like angels and stuff like that. It's just very, very cool stuff. And if you've
It's
ever read,
very,
if you've ever read Genesis to your kids, this is like a helpful aid to visualize some of those Genesis scenes of
Yeah.
like the serpent in the garden and the Nephilim and things like this. This provides a really good visualization for a lot of these kinds of situations for kids. Because some of that stuff's hard to explain to a kid. And they're like, I don't know what that means. And you're also like, well, I don't know how to explain this stuff, so it really helps explain some of this stuff, but it's just in such a fun way, and I think it's just a fun show too. Like it looks really great.
It's so fun. Like it's so colorful and joyful. It's got like this 80s color palette that it's like exciting and very like heavenly. Like if you're thinking that heaven is an awesome, fun place,
Hmm.
like this is a good show for you. Like it's very awesome. That's like awesome with like a paintbrush type script font
Yes, yes,
in
yes.
hot pink lettering
In hot pink lettering.
with a drop shadow. It's that kind of awesome.
Yeah. Who was your favorite
It-
character?
I mean, like Gabriel himself is the character we get to spend the most time with.
Yeah. And it gets
But
kind of early on to judge who the best characters will
yeah,
be. I mean, I
they were
even
all,
like the little cat, like
well, the cat.
winged little friend. Even he's great, but he doesn't say barely anything. And if he does, he hasn't said anything yet, really. Um,
Yeah,
and then one of the characters, I don't think this is much of a spoiler because they started this out this way, but the lady, Anara was her name, maybe? I don't remember her name now. Knock, Gabriel, Anara? I don't remember. But
yeah,
it's a lady who, and then she starts out. Obviously, this is like she's starting out in a negative place with her character arc. Like she's kind of like, as a Christian, it's like she's doing something like worshiping false idols. She's making sacrifices to false gods, but she's really like not aware of what she's doing. And obviously, she comes from this culture that does this. And so she thinks this is the thing she's supposed to do. But the interaction between her and Knock is so great. It's just so much fun. Weren't you saying that you loved how, like, her reaction? She's like, what did she say? She's like,
I
I'm
really
doing
like,
something here. Like, you're
yeah.
interrupting me from doing this thing. It's just so
So
it's fun.
a little, so yeah, you were saying they put this in the trailer, and
Hmm.
if you've seen the trailer, there's a scene where it appears that a female human character is making some kind of sacrifice to an idol, and things get very intense, like as if there's, some kind of spirit showing up, and it's very
Right.
like intense. So that
It's a
part in the
Nephilim. Yeah.
show is, yeah, it's a Nephilim that shows up, and he's enormous, and he kind of starts destroying things.
Yeah.
And he basically ignores her, even though
Hmm.
she feels that she's the one who summons him, like she
Right.
summoned him so that he would do something for her. And he basically just ignores her and proceeds to destroy her village.
Right.
And she keeps running after him, trying to get his attention, trying to tell him that she's important.
Yeah.
And um, and then this character, Knock, comes in and he calls himself a giant killer. And
Mhm.
he is trying to, rescue her. And she
He's like
doesn't,
trying to help her out or
yeah.
save her from being harmed or save other people from being harmed by this. But
And she
who knows how
she
much
just,
more he
yeah.
knows than her? It's just that he obviously knows that he's dangerous and she's not aware of how dangerous this whole thing is.
Yeah, she just doesn't know what's going on. So he's rescuing her, and she's like, I am trying to do something here.
Yeah.
And it just cracked me up. It just felt like such a futile,
Yeah.
um, like everyone can see that it was a complete disaster. And
Right. Everyone but her is like, what are you doing? This is
yeah,
terrible.
it
You
just kind
know?
of reminded me of of how we try to take matters into our own hands, like spiritually,
Yeah.
and we try to like make stuff happen spiritually. And
In a way, it's a
and
shoe-in, right? When with
yeah,
the Genesis story, it's a shoe-in with the fall of Adam and Eve, right? In a way, it's kind of like its own, the story is opening up, just like how the Bible does, on somebody making a foolish mistake, right?
yeah,
And then we can all see that and go, "Oh, that's really foolish. Don't do that." You know?
yeah,
And that's just how kind of how God has laid out the narrative of the Bible. And so this story seems to be taking a cue from that and also introducing us to a character who's not really fully aware of what she's doing, but we're all trying to help her and we all care about her and we don't want her to get hurt. We don't want anybody else to get hurt, you know?
yeah,
And so these Nephilim are really causing havoc, and somebody needs to come. And then also Gabriel in his own place, which Gabriel kind of lives on this almost like a moon that's on over this planet, right? And this planet's kind of, I think, supposed to represent Earth, but it's not Earth. And so it's not a direct comparison to our world, but it's like this other universe, right? And it's just really fun. And so Gabriel lives on this other place, kind of as a representation, I think, of the Garden of Eden. And there's like seeds of life there, and he's supposed to
yeah,
protect this garden. And someone shows up to tell him that he might be needed elsewhere soon. And then when these Nephilim show up in the garden, and Gabriel's like very curious about him, but he's not like shocked or perplexed or anything. He's just kind of very curious. Like, what is he doing here? He's not from here. And then he starts running in to try to get the seeds of life, and he has to fight this Nephilim. And it's
yeah,
just very impressive the way these characters have been fleshed out very, very clearly. They've clearly put a lot of thought into these characters, and they seem to be very consistent. Um, but seeing that battle between the two of them was really great. I mean, there's a lot of things happening there, and they have the action sequences are really well laid out, very much like an anime would be.
yes.
Um, very
It's very
impressive.
fast paced.
I'm so impressed with this show. It
Yeah,
might literally be the top Angel show, period, hands down. It
yeah,
literally could be the top Angel show I've ever seen. It's incredible.
yeah, yeah. It's very
Yeah,
it's very
you're
fast
speechless. I
paced
can tell.
and a lot of fun. Very exciting. I just sent you a picture.
Oh, good.
Um,
Can you see it now?
yeah,
There you go. Yeah,
yeah. Sorry,
that's
it's a little pixelated looking there, but
yeah. I had to blow it up a little bit. It's a bit small, but that's okay. No, there's a lot of great stuff. And they've got stuff on their channel, and
I
uh,
like a lot of the plot points that they're setting up, where the girl character, she's probably gonna have like a character arc. We're gonna get a lot of exposition as they, explain as Knock the giant killer like explains to her what's going on. Um, and so that I'm looking forward to that unfolding. And I like the character of Gabriel is very like childlike.
yeah.
Um, and I really like they made this like kind of separation to where the little planet, the moon thing that you were talking about, where there's like a garden there and a star that seems to be like the only source of light for the planet below. And I'm all tongue-tied. Um, Gabriel is like a gardener there, which is funny because he's like super powerful, but
Hmm.
he's just a gardener.
Well, he
So,
he sees himself as just a gardener,
yeah,
but I think everybody else knows he's very powerful. And isn't this a great kind of character for kids? It's like
yeah,
a boy or a girl is growing up and they're humble. Like you like to see kids that are humble, but they actually can do great things, but they're not into themselves and they don't think highly of themselves.
Yeah.
And these are great kinds of people who you send off to do greater things, right? And so I think that's how this story is starting out is Gabriel is the right kind of person to do
Yeah.
bigger, greater things, you know?
Yeah. And they introduced that right away, like this idea that he's wanted for something greater. And then he's like, but I have to do this. This is important. I have to guard these seeds. And
Right.
um,
It's true.
so it's pretty cool. And they've got portals. There's like a portal opening up, and he's like,
Yeah.
that's not one of our portals.
Mm-hmm.
I just love
He
stuff like that.
he just exhibits a an endearing, innocent quality to
Yeah.
him. And like some of the greatest anime stories you've seen, he's very much like these really great innocent anime characters who have to go through hard times, you know. Um, so I'm very impressed. I mean, I love it. It's totally for kids. And I'm sure that there's some kids who are uh maybe below the age of 7 or 8 that could be too sensitive for this kind of material. But I would say above that, I think you're probably fine.
Yeah. The stuff on Earth, it's not Earth, but it's,
I think it's
Earth-like.
called Ara or something.
Yeah. Is a
Yeah,
little dark. It's a little like,
yeah,
pre-flood Noah.
right.
So now they don't go into it so far,
Right.
but you can tell it's just, I mean, it has more of a post-apocalyptic look to it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Um, but there's a lot of potential. And they even say like the little cat character, um, who's like a flying cat, who's like not just cute, not just a cute sidekick, like actually really powerful and
Yeah.
a good fighter. And like he refers to, he's like, you're going to be a sentry soon.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of room for character growth and development. Do you think we're going to see, do you think we're going to see the Son of Man in this?
Oh man, I don't know. And even the guy who comes to him, you can see him in the trailer. He has a beard and he's at first you're thinking, is that going to be God? Is he going to be the most
Yeah.
high?
Is that
Right?
God?
But he's not. He's kind of like someone who's higher in rank than Gabriel. And you could say maybe an archangel of sorts, and maybe Gabriel hasn't reached that maybe in this story, right? Gabriel hasn't reached archangel status yet. And so this higher angel has come to tell Gabriel that he might be needed elsewhere.
Yeah.
I suspect that there's going to be a complex uh series of hierarchies in this show because they have
Yeah.
already put a lot of thought into this show, I can tell. And so I don't think that they're going to depict a god in this show. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
If they do, it's going to be like a bright light or
Yeah.
something like above, right? So like
Hmm.
levels of greatness. I think this show is gonna be really careful the way it depicts God,
Yeah.
and is gonna show something like a burning bush or something more biblical, right? Something bright and beautiful, instead of just a typical character. That's what I think, but who knows
Hmm.
what they'll really do? They could surprise us all. Um, I'm here for it though. Like I can't wait for this show more.
Yeah.
I mean, we love a lot of Angel stuff that our kids love Tuttle Twins. Our kids love, there's another show too. And of course, we loved The Chosen. The Chosen is doing its own thing now, which is fine. We like them where they're at too. But this show, I would say, is as good as The Chosen. I mean, it's incredible. Um,
Yeah,
we've
I'd have
seen a
to
lot of
agree.
their work too. Like we've seen a lot of Angel's work.
Yeah, it's top notch.
Oh, Wing Feather's the other show I was thinking of. Wing
Oh
Feather's pretty
yeah.
good too. But
Yeah.
this is better than Wing Feather in my view.
Yeah.
It's kind of shocking how good it is.
Yeah,
Um,
because Wing Feather is quite good.
it's very good. Turtle Twins is really even better though than Wing Feather because it's just got tons of comedy packed in there. I mean, it's a top-notch,
Yeah.
world-class show. I mean, people underestimate how good Turtle Twins is, I think, or they don't talk about it enough. Um, I literally ordered some Turtle Twins t-shirts the other day. But so yeah, we're a fan, and this is like the start of a new beautiful relationship, I think.
And now it's time for a word from our sponsor, which is Angel Studios.
Yes. Thank you, Angel Studios. You're not paying for anything here. That's okay. We still
Right.
love your work, and and I have an angel shirt here somewhere I should wear. Maybe I don't know. But yeah, we just want to let you guys know that Angel's not the best thing since sliced bread, but they do have some pretty good shows every now and then. And this is one of them. So watch it. Gabriel
Yeah,
and the Guardians, people. It's great.
it's a good
So what's
one.
next? We have did you have any other things to mention before we continue
No.
on to our development portion?
Yeah, let's go into the development portion.
The development portion. So the main topic is, of course, development part three, where we're going to talk again about film development, and we're going to expand the discussion out to not just about my stuff, not just about getting people to feel, comfortable developing, but we're going to talk more about how you can develop something into something much bigger. And it's good that we talked about Angel Studios because Angel Studios is a good example of how people are doing this into the future now. And Hollywood even has not caught on to this yet. But much of this was already indicated in film history with things like Star Wars, the merchandising ideas of Star Wars. A lot of people think that, oh, well, Star Wars, sure, they were a pretty good selling movie, but they weren't an enormously selling movie, were they? Sure, people were going down around the block and it was a blockbuster, but that doesn't mean blah, 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 right? Well, the merchandising made, I don't know, 4 or 5 times the amount of money as the films. When you have something like Star Wars and you have good merchandising, that translates to like such a large amount of money in comparison to the film that people don't even realize that. I mean, we talk about how Sound of Freedom was a success and it made 250 million on I think a $17 million budget. I mean, imagine $1.5 billion. That's the kind of stuff that merchandising does. And I'm not even here just to talk about merchandising. I'm here to talk about how to develop your project to take advantage of the potential that your project might have into the future. So again, it's not about um, being bad stewards, right? We do want to be good stewards, but the object isn't uh, that stewardship is just about money. It's not. Stewardship is actually about what the real mission is. So no mission creep should be happening, right? Mission creep is where you lose your focus on what you're supposed to be doing, right? Everyone can assume, oh, it's because you're working film. Oh, you should be working in Hollywood. Oh, you should be doing this. Oh, you should be doing that. You just engaged in mission creep. Just it's that simple to do that. Don't assume what God wants you to do with your talents. Don't assume, oh, because I'm a film person, that must mean this and this and this or something. No, don't assume any of that. What you should do is look at the facts, right? And the facts are God has purposes for all these things. Utilize the facts for God's will, right? So he's giving you tools and then you use those tools responsibly. But without tools, you can't use them responsibly. You don't even know what choices you have, right? So you have so many choices when you're a filmmaker. And when you're developing a project, right, you have choices. So what I want to let people know is that, this is I call this development in heaven, right? Or development heaven. If you're going to develop a picture, the least you can do is have faith that God can help you develop this in the way it's meant to be developed properly. Like as though you were in heaven. How would this be developed in heaven? Well, first of all, God has all the money you need to invest. He's already got it. You don't need to worry about that stuff. But what you do need to do sometimes, right? Kind of like farming. Your farm, if you have 100 acres, that farm has unlimited potential. But that doesn't mean you just sit there and look at it, go, why is this farm not living up to its potential? No, you have to work that farm and you work it a certain way. So that's what we're talking about. I want to let people know that Christian filmmakers can know that there's a formula for them to have success. Okay, so there is a formula for you to have success with your stories. But that formula is much more simple than you think. The formula is to find peace with God, not peace in the world. The end. Okay, I know I'm being a little funny here, but I'm also being real with you. Uh, the truth is, that is the truth, right? Because I'm not here to tell you that success is the same in the kingdom of God as it is in the world, because it's not. Okay. Success is you finding peace with God in what you're doing in your day to day, even if it's something as small and simple as washing dishes. Remember, we talked about this with the presence, practicing the presence of God with Brother Lawrence, right?
Yeah.
So that's success in the kingdom of God. But imagine that washing dishes was just a very lucrative business and you made millions of dollars doing it. Well, right? Some people are really good at washing dishes and other people are not. But the idea isn't to be to compare yourself to others in your dishwashing ability. The idea is to be the best dishwasher that God wants you to be, right? And that might mean washing dishes very well, or it might mean washing more dishes, or it might mean joy in washing dishes. It might mean washing the right dishes. So there's a lot of ways you can judge what the best dishwashing is according to the will of the Lord. So in this case, right, this is about storytelling. This is about having a relationship with your audience in order to do what? In order to tell a story that changes people. And you can tell a story in many, many different ways. First of all, you got to have joy doing this. It's something that you have to do. Why? Because development is called development hell for a reason. And when you're in production, it's very difficult. I told my friend Ryder the Omniscient, it can grind you to powder when you're in production. You could be a month, you're working 16-hour days for a month. It'll wear you thin, right? If you don't have love for this subject, if you don't have love for storytelling through filmmaking, right? It's going to be difficult for you, right? It's going to be very difficult for you. And you're going to start getting into arguments with people, being very unlikable, being one of those tyrannical artists who has to have their own way all the time, or you're going to feel pushed around by other people and you're not going to feel very happy. Like it's not going to be very enjoyable for you. You have to love this thing so much, right? Like your own little baby, to where you will suffer for it. You will suffer for it, and you're okay with that, you know? So that's a really important thing to remember. And that's why I said peace with God is your formula for success, right? You have peace with God and in what you're doing. This can push you through those really, really hard times. Okay. And we've kind of talked about this before, but it's important to remember. We're not here to make people rich and famous. Okay. We're here to tell you that you have to love changing the world through film and storytelling. You have to love it. And so if you get past that, once you get past that, now that you have peace in God, with God, now the next step comes. After that, you can learn to work together with God's people to make bigger goals happen. And you don't mind if this film is not yours fully, or if you don't have full control of everything happening, or if things didn't work out the way you wanted them to work out, or if you're not getting paid the same amount you want to get paid, or whatever it is, or if people keep complaining about your work, and they don't like what you're doing, right? So now you're doing something bigger. You're able to do bigger goals, make bigger goals happen because you found peace with God, and then you found peace with your work, and now you can find peace with others when you do that thing, right? So now you can press forward with a strong foundation that's confident in what you're doing. You and you're not engaging in mission creep, right? The mission is not to get famous and make money. The mission is not to make other people happy and always meet their standards for you. The mission is not always even to meet your own standards. The mission is the Lord's standards, okay, for this project. So, goals may include maximizing the potential for projects to reach people through crowdfunding and distribution. So, crowdfunding and distribution. Crowdfunding is a unique animal. I personally haven't done a lot of crowdfunding. I've started half of a project in crowdfunding. And the reason I didn't actually go through with it is because it was a hard nut to crack. I was really surprised. But this was a while ago. This was like 10 years ago or something. This is when crowdfunding was in its infancy. And so since then, I've learned a great deal about it. And this is why I talk about Angel Studios and people like them who are doing crowdfunding. And you can see as you observe, as you do research, it's kind of the future. So I believe crowdfunding is that way. Why? Because it's already establishing a relationship with your fans. And it's constantly gauging the commitment of your fans. How committed are your fans to this project? So your finger is literally on the pulse of getting feedback from your fans, and you're able to either give or not give what many of these fans are asking for. And having that relationship is really invaluable. It puts you in a direct relationship with your customer where Hollywood doesn't have that at all. Like Hollywood, like in a way, right? Hollywood is smart to do this though, because what they do is they put their most attractive and skillful people in the front, which is the celebrities. And the celebrities talk about their film and talk it up, and they're highly skilled at doing this. And so you can see then why the studios do this. This represents the face of that project to the public. And so that's their fan base, that's their customer. And so that's what they want is a good face on this. Well, there's no reason that you can't do the same thing for a crowdfund. And I think in many ways, like 99% of people do not do this. And I don't know why. Studios, they have a contractual relationship with their celebrities. And there's no reason that you can't draw up a contract with your talent as well to say you are the marketing face of this project. We're going to hire you not only to shoot this film with us, but to also be the marketing face of this project. And you know why actors should say yes? You know why they should go, yes, sir, I will do that, even though this is a small crowdfunding project? Because when the studios see these actors doing that, they go, this guy is a good actor. This guy gets it. He knows how Hollywood works. This guy could also be helpful to us, right? Because this is how the studio system works. An actor that already knows that, you're a shoo-in, buddy. So you are understanding the true purpose of an actor when you do that. This is just how Hollywood works. So your crowdfunding project now can do the same thing. And you can hire your actor to both work on your proof of concept or trailer or short before you make the feature, and also do marketing for it in your crowdfund with your actor, who is much more skilled at this than you are, a producer, director, writer, right? And now you could certainly do that as well. There's no reason you can't do that. But I wouldn't do it if you're not as good as your actor at doing it. I would ask your actor to do this as well as go on interviews, go on podcasts, do these kinds of things. Interview your actor, right? If you're a director, writer, producer, literally interview them. Or you could you have multiple actors possibly. They could interview each other. You could do a lot of these kinds of things, right? And these things, if you've ever seen a crowdfund on Kickstarter or wherever, Indiegogo, WeFunder, many other places, uh, they they add this kind of promotional material to their crowdfund, and it can take the form of like an update or just an additional promotional video. And what you want to do is continue to add to this crowdfund, to this the material in your crowdfund, because this is really just marketing, a marketing effort, right? You can study other people like Angel, see how they do this. Angel does this in a different way, right? Because what they've done is taken like Kickstarter, um, or like I mentioned, the other platforms, some of the other platforms, and they've done it all in-house. So they have this studio in Utah. They literally do all their marketing material in their studio. And where most filmmakers or whatever, they're in their room or whatever, um, they don't have a studio to do all these things. Well, Angel does. Angel has a studio. They can do all these live streams, right? And this is where they gain a relationship with their fans. You can go in the chat and have build these relationships with you and that's what they're doing. They're building their relationship with their fan base, just like a crowdfund would do, because they are crowdfunding. But because it just looks like a professional video to you, you don't think of it in terms of, oh, this is like a Kickstarter crowdfund. No, you don't do that because it's just done very professionally. So I assure you, if you also see the potential in what crowdfunding can do for you, you could literally do what Angel does. And they spend millions of dollars doing it. You don't have to spend millions of dollars doing it, right? You're going to have to get used to using those tools. Yes. You're going to have to get used to doing some of these things on video. Yes. But like I said, you might not have to do that yourself as a director producer. This could be part of your actor's gig. So distribution is another matter, right? So I talked about how goals may include maximizing potential for projects to reach people through crowdfunding and distribution, right? So what you have to do when you're first starting your picture is consider the end goal. Consider where it's supposed to be going, right? Is this going to end up on Tubi? Is it going to end up on YouTube? Is it going to end up on another streaming platform? What are you aiming for? At a certain point, you just recognize, right? Professional content is professional content. It doesn't matter what platform it's on, right? It either looks professional or it does not. So that's number one. Understand that you need to make professional content. You can't make just a YouTube influencer video. Okay. When you're here to make a film, you're not going to make something of the same quality as a YouTube influencer video, right? So that has to go out the window. What you have to do instead is look at what does professional content look like, right? What does it sound like? What does it look like? What's the color palette? What kind of lighting? What kind of whatever? And so this is something that filmmakers think about constantly, right? I know I do. So you have to think about, you have to consider all that stuff, right? So you're going to have to team up with a lot of people, right? Because typically a producer, director, writer does not know how to do all these things. And that's got to be okay with you, right? You have to team up with generally a cinematographer, you have to team up with an actor, right? And if you're a producer, you might have to team up with a writer. If you're a director, you might have to team up with a producer, etc. That kind of deal. This is your above the line group of people, except the cinematographer is just barely below the line. He's kind of like cinematographer is basically, or a DOP is basically like the top person in your crew, essentially, right? The person you care about most in your crew because that person really has the greatest impact on the look of your film, right? And you're going to need them from the beginning because they help you create the creative look of that picture. So get that cinematographer pretty quick, pretty early on. You can also get an editor pretty early on, or a production designer, or even a visual effects person. Because what you have to do is establish the look of your picture. That's really, really important, right? So, similarly to how you're making these decisions, you're doing that with maximizing your potential for your project to reach people through crowdfunding and distribution. I'm just going to keep saying this, okay? Your goal has to be maximizing the potential for projects to reach people through crowdfunding and distribution. Okay? You get it? So, to maximize the potential, you have to not say no to certain things right off the bat. You have to not say no to something like merchandising. You have to not say no to something like a great soundtrack, right? Or selling certain products, or writing a book to go along with it, or do lots of extra things that you might think, why would I want to do that? I'm just a filmmaker, right? You have to put that no out of your head. Stop saying no to all that stuff and say, sure, why not? In a way, I don't care. Sure. Or you can be really excited about it. That's fine too. But you got to stop saying no to those things because if you're saying no to all those things, you're not maximizing the potential for projects to reach people through crowdfunding and distribution. Right? So this has to be your goal. Your goal has to be to maximize the potential for projects to reach people through crowdfunding and distribution. Also, you got to stop thinking of your film as a film. It's a project. It's a project to reach people through crowdfunding and distribution, right? So, crowdfunding and distribution, right? Crowdfunding is something you can do. Distribution might not be something you can do. But if you make distribution part of your crowdfund, now it might be something you can do, right? But the reason I mentioned both is because they're both so important. Distribution is incredibly important, right? Because it's about maximizing the potential for projects to reach people through crowdfunding and distribution. Okay? So these have to be your goals if you really want to do development correctly. In the 80s, I remember, and I've mentioned this before, that people were thinking of TV shows for kids through merchandising. I'm not saying you have to do that, but I'm just saying that that kind of thinking can actually be very helpful because what it does is it doesn't say no to how you're supposed to build this project, right? You can build it in other ways. And so, like let's say a series, right? Series are generally very um, character driven. So, in a way, it's all about your character and not even about your plot, right? Let's just throw the plot out the window. Psh, doesn't matter. What you have to do is grow a love affair with this character. And now it's the same thing, like I just said, with these 80s shows. It's not about the show, it's about the merchandising. The merchandising is your character, right? It's the character in your series. So you have a character that you fall in love with, and this character creates, basically, reverse engineers this series. There's something that I remember I used to say, and I think David Mamet said something similar, where basically, uh, see what he said. I think it was something like, character is plot and plot is character. Actually, that's what I said. Character is plot and plot is character. That's what I say. I think David Mamet said something like character doesn't exist or plot doesn't exist or something of that sort. And basically what he's trying to do is help you to kind of melt in your brain the idea of how you're supposed to create stories, right? Stop thinking so much about plot. Stop thinking so much about the things that we typically think about and think about it in a different way. So this is the same kind of thing, right? Instead of just getting obsessed with plot twists and things like this, which twists are great, write it down, right? You should have a large notepad of these kinds of things, but they're not essential to making a great story, right? So similarly to what I was just saying about these 80s shows, right, where they would reverse engineer it based on merchandising or whatever, it's not about the merchandising, it's about the character. The character is your plot. So when you discover who your character is when you're writing them, you start to understand that there is barely no way around the kind of plot this character needs in order to develop properly. So you start out with a character like we were just talking about Gabriel and the Guardians, right? And this girl was like starting out in the beginning, obviously not a perfect character. None of them are perfect. Actually, Gabriel seems very innocent and naive in a way, but he's going to be sent off to war. He thinks he's just a gardener, right? So, what is the necessary plot to bring Gabriel out of his shell into who he truly is? Now, to start Gabriel and the Guardians, you can't just know only as much as we know right now with the first episode of Gabriel and the Guardians. You have to know enough about Gabriel or enough about these other characters to know what the plot is going to be. But you want to know enough about them to know all their strengths and weaknesses, right? And then you imagine, what if I was Gabriel? What would I need to get past these difficult circumstances? How would I get past kind of the blindness or the naivete or the innocence, which maybe is good, but maybe also bad, the kind of innocence you might have, in order to grow in Christ, in order to grow and become a better person, right? And so obviously that female character, right, she has to learn how she got to where she was, thinking that everything's fine to do these kinds of things, and then realizing how dangerous and how harmful it was for her to do that. So she has to get to the point where she's seeing maybe the pain she's caused others, or she's seeing maybe the pain or the weakness that she had to just do what was socially acceptable without thinking about the consequences of that. Right. And so this is kind of how you start a show with only knowing the characters. Right. So if you love those characters, if you love these, what they should be iconic characters. Right. And so these iconic characters you fall in love with, and then you get to know their arc, their story arc, which must happen for them to develop. And some characters, sure, you have comedies and tragedies, right? Some characters are tragedies, right? You don't want necessarily everything to go perfectly for everybody in your story. That can get kind of boring, frankly, right? It's too perfect. It's not like real life. The truth is, many people, their life is like a tragedy, right? And they even have the answer in front of them, and then they fail to reach out for it and claim the truth and see the truth and live up to the truth and live in discipline and like do the right thing. Some people fail to do this. So this is all part of, to be a good writer, you're really falling in love with life. You're falling in love with how great life is and how you deal with difficulties in life. And then you're imprinting that in your characters. And as your character learns and grows, you actually are learning and growing too. Because there's weaknesses you put into your characters that you actually possess. And now you have to learn how to get through this. And then you write that into your character. It's just beautiful. I love this kind of stuff because of the beauty of that, right? So artists can learn a great deal about themselves by putting themselves into their work fully. So but again, this is about that goal meeting agenda. And the goals may include maximizing the potential for projects to reach people through crowdfunding and distribution, right? So in order to do that, you have to stop saying no to like, oh, this should not become a book, and oh, this should not become merchandising, and oh, this should not become this, and oh, this should not. I just want to work on this one single aspect because that's what I like doing. You have to understand that filmmaking involves many people. And frankly, you should be working with people who are smarter than you. And so if you keep telling yourself, oh, I can't do that, I can't write a book, or I can't do this, or I can't do that, nobody's asking you to. People are asking you to say yes to it. That's all. People are asking you to believe in the possibility of it. That's it. People are asking you to remain open to the possibility that your project has greater potential than you know right now. This is what development is. It's just you understanding that you might just be wanting to make a web series but you could actually make a whole franchise with these characters. And that could end up being movies as well as series, as well as merchandising, as well as books, as well as this and that. And if you're in love with these characters already, you don't mind spending a few years doing that and approving and signing off on those things getting done. But you're the one who has to do the work to develop these characters well enough to where they can become those great potential characters that people will enjoy that much. That's your job. And if you love those characters, it's something you can do. Why would you say no to that? So, this is what development can do. And some of these things can spin off into other stories too. You don't have to just stick to one franchise or even just one film or whatever, what have you. I think a lot of filmmakers work in a way that's like this movie, this singular film taught me so much. I'm going to now work on this totally different project, but using tools I learned from this other project, right? But unless you're doing something like development, you're not seeing all those things you could be learning. So you can do that, right? So this is all about learning ways of maximizing potential, right? That's what this is about. So, like, for example, there's this book. Sometimes you'll find this in like business books or self-help books or what have you. There's this book for filmmakers, indie filmmakers. If you've ever heard of this guy named who does this thing called the indie film hustle, he is big on this subject. And he's a very indie filmmaker. He has a podcast called the Indie Film Hustle, I believe. There's other filmmakers like this, but he has a pretty good in-depth little book. I don't have it with me right now. I don't know where it is. I think it's called the Indie Film Hustle or something. I don't know. Um, Maybe I'll put it in the notes or something. But it's got a lot of stuff like this. Stuff for maximizing the potential for projects to reach people through crowdfunding and distribution, right? So, and another great reason I mentioned crowdfunding is because crowdfunding by itself encourages you to think of rewards for your fans and a variety of rewards for your fans. And why is that so helpful? Because it's part of maximizing the potential, right? It's part of understanding that this story can take a variety of shapes and forms and products and services, right? And so all of this stuff will ready you not just to do your own independent filmmaking through crowdfunding, but it can ready you for the big boys in Hollywood if you do happen to want to go there, or if you're right for doing that, or for working with Angel Studios, or for working with Lore TV, or for working with Netflix, or for working with these guys who understand how this works, right? And who want to be part of that. And so if you're already doing that through crowdfunding and working with your fans and all these things, sure, you might want to stay there and be independent and do your own thing all you want. Sure, you might want to do that and you might remain there. Or now you have choices, right? Now, what you could do is find other partnerships and work on other platforms. There's even like how I mentioned, Angel Studios, right? You might not want to work with them, but you might want to work with Lore TV. They do something similar. Or you might want to work with Legion M. They do something similar. They do a lot of horror and like small indie films, but they're great. They are doing some good pictures. A lot of their pictures go to theaters and they do Fathom events and things like this. You can go to Legion, I think it's legionm.com. Um, and they are basically their own little crowdfunding platform as well. They literally got crowdfunded to start their crowdfunding platform. And they seem like another good possibility for people, you know? But I don't think these things are going to be going anywhere. I think what you need to do is start, if crowdfunding is not your ultimate ideal for how you want to do things, right? That's fine. Don't let it be your ultimate vision for where you want to go. But I think you should start out there, right? I think you should start out trying to do it with smaller projects. Um, there's a lot of ways, for example, when I was at AFM, working at AFM, I just saw pitch decks, a lot of pitch decks. And a pitch deck is basically like, I mean, like a folder, like it's like a folder of stuff. And you're opening your folder, and you've got all this information in it. You could have, like, back in the day, they would have like a DVD or whatever, which might have your trailer in it. Now you could have like a flash drive or something, or you could provide a link, right, to something that's already online. And it's like a private link or something, because you don't want to put stuff public when you're trying to sell stuff. If you put it public, then a lot of people are like, well, how do I have exclusive rights to this if other people can just grab it? So what you want is a private link to something like on your Vimeo or something. I don't know. And there's a variety of places you can put that. But what I would see is pitch decks with a variety of products, just products. It's like you're like a guy in a back alley back in the day. When it's the guy in the back alley, this guy's jacket. You want to buy a watch or something like that? You want to buy one of these things? Sure, you don't have to be silly like that about it. But the truth is, so many of these producers, what they do is they have already learned how to maximize their potential for their project to reach people through crowdfunding and distribution. That's what they're doing, right? They have learned and they understand that the marketplace might want a variety of things from your story. So, sure, you might think, well, merchandising is silly or whatever. Sure, I can relate. I can understand. I can understand, right? You know what? T-shirts that have whatever on a logo, people aren't going to want to just buy that. I understand that. Sure, that's maybe it seems kind of silly. But guess what? You love story. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing this. So why don't you hire a comic book artist to make you a comic book for, let's say, a few $1,000s, right? Not all comic book artists are super expensive to work with, right? Some of them, not all of them work for DC and Marvel, right? Some of them are just indie comic book artists starting out. If you give them a few $1,000s, they will make you something great. Maybe start small, do each bit of the process, do the writing first, work with them on the writing, do the inking, do the other stuff, learn how the process works, right? To make something like a comic. If you like comics, right? If you already decided, oh, I should make a storyboard for my film, you're already creating visuals for your film. Might as well go all the way and make a comic. Yes, it's more expensive than doing storyboards, but is it really that much better to pay less money and then have just storyboards when you could create a product along with it where now you got a comic book which has your story in it. You could sell your comic book. You could crowdfund the comic book. Now you don't have to pay a few $1,000s to get the comic book. Now, instead of saying I'm making storyboards, you're saying I'm making a comic book for my film, right? You don't even have to talk about the film yet, right? Sometimes people don't like these big, audacious plans and goals. I understand. That doesn't mean you can't have them. It doesn't mean you can't have all these plans that hopefully each one will work. Maybe some of them don't work. Who cares? Whatever. Maybe it doesn't need to be a graphic novel or something, right? Okay, fine. But maybe at least you could believe that this concept to make storyboards could get a little more hyped up enough to do a crowdfund. Do the crowdfund maybe of a comic book, get to learn the process, right? Now you might spend just a few $100s to get the crowdfund going. Your fans, if they're growing, if they like your story, if they like the imagery you've got going, now they're paying you to get this comic book made, right? And then after that, what could you do with it? After that, you could do other products. Before you even get to the film, you could work on the trailer. You could crowdfund for your trailer. You could crowdfund for a short film, a proof of concept, so that maybe you could work out the animatics or the visual effects, right? Because not every film just has a storyboard starting out to visualize their film. They might want animatics. Well, now you might make a visual effects laden short film, right? Sure, that could cost you maybe 20 grand. Who knows? Well, you could crowdfund it, right? If people like the comic book, maybe they will like the visual effects laden short film, right? Guess what? Now you've got enough fans from a comic and from a visual effects laden short film. Maybe you could fund a feature now, where if you had started out trying to just fund a feature, you don't have enough fans to do that. It's taking you too long. Why is it taking you so long? Why can you not find enough people to fund this feature film? You sure you're ambitious and you're a filmmaker, but that's what filmmakers do, right? They make feature films. No, not anymore. They do all these other things. Why? Because they have to market themselves. We talked about how filmmakers have to market themselves now. Sure, I don't like it just as much as anybody else. But guess what? That's how you gain creative control over stuff these days. That's just how kind of how it works now. And now with crowdfunding, right? You can start out with a smaller project, snowball into a little bit bigger project, snowball into a little bit bigger project. Guess what? Guess who else does this? Angel Studios. They do rounds of funding. They don't just do one big fund, they do rounds of funding. They have a stage called gauging interest or something. They're just gauging your interest. How many people are interested in this? They start out having the guild vote on it sometimes. Let's just have the guild vote on it. All these phases of gauging what kind of fan base we got going on here for this project. And that's how you have to start thinking. How am I going to gauge if the fans want to buy this product? Right? And sure, I know you might be thinking, I'm an artist. I don't care about products, content. Sure, I understand. I can relate. Totally relate. But doesn't that mean you should be responsible with all of these resources being spent so you can get this film made? These are people's hard-earned money. They want to know that you've got a good enough story that they will put their hard-earned dollars in there. And how are they going to know that unless you show them something, right? Early on, like a comic book or like a short film or like a trailer. It used to be back in the day, Hollywood would just, bam, here's your new film to watch. People would be like, nobody asked for this film, right? Well, now we don't have to do that. We can gauge what kind of stuff fans would like. I've seen stuff on Angel Studios just kind of like peter away. Probably because there wasn't enough fans to hold that project afloat. There's stuff on Lore TV that was there last year, not there anymore. Wonder why? Actually, I don't. I know why. There's not enough fans to hold that project afloat. So maybe they didn't develop this project enough to start maximizing the potential for projects to reach people through crowdfunding and distribution. Right? So this is what you have to do. You have to be willing to think about your project in this way. And I say project, right? Even if you're a filmmaker, I say project because you have to think of it not as a film. You have to think about it as a story. Project is how to get this story out to reach people. And it's not just so people can see it, right? Oh, that's great. There's a bit of content on Netflix. Maybe I shall see it. Goodness, how boring. I don't want to do that. I don't want to see your project. I want you to reach people, right? That means maybe affect them a little bit emotionally with some feels. This is not something you can just do tomorrow. If you write a script, no, you have to develop it into something that can reach people, right? And how are you going to figure that out unless you show some people your project, talk about your project, say, what did you like about this, right? If you can't do that, how are you going to know it's going to reach people? If you're sharing your script with somebody and they're like giving you feedback and you're like, I don't know if I like this. And you're like, oh, that guy, he doesn't get my style or something. And so what are you going to do if your fans don't like it? If the customers don't like it and don't buy it, you're gonna complain about it and be, oh, they don't like my style. Yeah, you're literally correct. They don't like your style, right? And now how many films are you going to make after this? So keep in mind, your market matters. People matter. Your fans matter. And this isn't just about curating your fans, being like, well, what kind of horror film do I want to make? What kind of fans are the fans I really want? That's a good consideration. But guess what? You're also changing your own style because you want to get better at development, but just being a better storyteller, a better filmmaker, right? You really do want to reach people. You really do want to do that, right? So this is a process. This is how you do that. Because goals may include, say it with me, maximizing the potential for projects to reach people through crowdfunding and distribution, right? So you have to do that. And were you listening to my spiel, honey? What do you think?
Yes, I was.
I know I'm like Mr. Instructive, Mr. Instructo. I'm Mr. Instructo. Uh, did you have any thoughts? Because it felt like you had some thoughts there. Go ahead.
Crowdfunding and distribution.
That's right.
That's what you got to be thinking about.
Yeah, like I know we've talked about some of my past projects and so much of this stuff I just wasn't willing to do or wasn't interested in, you know? And now I'm like, well, why? You know, there's nothing wrong with, I mean, what Angel Studios does, for example, You go on their site and there's like they have a whole shop of merchandise. And yeah, that might offend people, that people might be like, oh, that's so tawdry and cheap or whatever. But like that's sometimes what you have to do to get your film made.
Well, people like merchandise,
People
like
actually do. Yeah.
because you feel like you're making a connection with other people who like the same content that you do. But it's not just that you like content. There's some kind of philosophy behind the brand,
Yeah.
behind the IP that you can relate to or that you can identify with. So if you're identifying with that IP, then and then you meet someone else who identifies with that IP, it's just like you feel like it feels like it's meant to be. Like we
Yeah.
both like Star Wars.
It really
Wow.
is kind of special. It's a little bit special. You
It
know,
does. Yeah, it feels special.
well, it's like you've experienced something with somebody. And that's there's kind of a bond you form when you do that
Yeah.
with somebody. That's just a fact. It's just a, it's a basic fact. That's why I also still believe in the theatrical experience. The theatrical experience is still something that I don't think is going to go away, you know, at least not anytime soon. And because communities matter, face to face, in person relationships matter.
Yeah.
Like there is this, I don't know, there's this thinking, I think, in society that I guess you could call it progressive thinking. There's politics involved with this, psychology involved with this. Sure, there's a lot of stuff involved with this. But there's this idea that we're always progressing as a society, and now we're progressing because we have the internet. Now we're progressing to where we don't need other people. Now we're progressing our society. Do you like my? Now we're progressing to the place where we just don't need a face-to-face relationship with people. No, that's not progression. That's what I call deconstruction. That's a deconstruction, right? So society is breaking down and atomizing, and people are being fooled into believing they're progressing, I'm becoming really progressive. I don't need people. I'm progressive.
That's really weird.
It's
How could it
nonsense to believe. I'm sorry.
how could we not need people? I mean,
Exactly. It's nonsense. But that's basically what social media and the internet has been trying to tell people,
hmm,
because that's the effect it has on people, right? It's not even about the philosophy, because in a way the internet is just about empowering people, right, with knowledge or whatever, connections. So there's not necessarily this one holistic philosophy, but there's this general belief that it gives you more freedom or more power or something, empowers you in some way. But what people, but that's like the promise of illicit drugs, right? Like, oh, it's going to make you this or that. What's the result though? What is the actual result? What is the effective end of doing that? Does it actually empower you, make you a better person somehow? Generally, no. And that to me is the same thing with the internet. Because what's happened is social media companies have turned it into this way for them to make money on your information, and also to get you to treat it like an illicit drug, a shot of heroin. And I mean that quite literally. It has the same effect on the human brain as a shot of heroin.
yeah.
They've already done research on this, they already know it's true. And do you think heroin is going to be good for you? Good for you? Oh, but it just loosens me up. I'm good socially now.
Heroin
I've
is
had enough
bad for
heroin.
you.
Such a shocking statement. Of course, it's not good for you.
Mhm.
The doom scrolling is called that for a reason, right? My point is not to hate on the internet and social media. That's not my point. My point is to remind people that in-person relationships are different. They're more effective, they're more productive, they're more real. They're like touching grass. People say touch grass. No, talk to some people face to face. That is more of the opposite of what social media is. Touching grass is not. You can literally, I don't know if you knew this, you can touch grass and scroll. Did you know that? Touching grass is not the best example of what people need to do to counteract the bad, negative results of social media on your life. Social media. It's more like anti-social media, right? And so to counteract that, what do you have to do? Have some face-to-face relationships. No kidding. That's actually what you have to do because it's the same muscle that's atrophied. Well, when you have atrophied muscles, what do you need to do? Touch grass? You could be touching it just because you can't lift your arms. I'm touching grass now. Yeah, I can't move, but I can move my fingers. No, get up and do some exercise, buddy. That's what you do. And so, what's the kind of exercise we need to do? In person relationships. That's actually the solution to this nonsense. And likewise, with all of this development conversation, right, we're having, development is about you and other professionals of your ilk getting together, shooting the breeze, yes, but also talking about maximizing the potential for your story to reach people, right? Because you
through
care about it.
through development and distribution and crowdfunding.
Close, almost got it. Goals may include maximizing the potential for projects to reach people through crowdfunding and distribution. That's right. I've got it written down, so that's why I can say this. So, this is how development in heaven works.
Mhm.
Development in heaven understands that you have the potential to do all these things, right? Because God has the funding you need and all the extra help you need. And why doesn't he just give it to you now? Right? That's impatience speaking. It's not a good thing. Be impatient. You have to go through development, heaven, get some in-person relationships going on. People who hopefully are a little bit professional like understand that in order to maximize these potential, you're going to have to do research. You're going to, like, for example, the comic book thing, right? You're going to have to research. If you're not a comic book person, how are you going to figure out how to do it? Sure, in a way, you're just the project manager, right? You don't have to be an artist, but you're going to have to hire some. So, where are you going to get that money? How are you going to find them? The internet is not useless. It is a useful tool. I didn't say it's not a useful tool. Find people on the internet who can do this work, but then hopefully you can meet them, have a real relationship with them, even if it's just a Zoom meeting or something, right? You're really working together on this thing to make it happen. Why? Because if you do a good job, everybody gets paid. That's why, including your friend, your new friend. They want to get paid, right? But hopefully they understand that not just being demanding and difficult is going to help them get paid. They want to be friendly and have a working relationship, right? And this is why the in-person relationship thing is necessary for people to understand. It's not just about typing, on social media, I want to get what I want, blah, blah, blah. Why won't people give me what they want? Well, you're not very nice about it. Why would people want to work with you if you're just an antisocial person who's on social media all the time? This is not going to work for you. You got to have some relationships. You got to meet people for coffee. You got to start talking to them about your passion for this story and why you care about it so much. And then they can kind of like get the fumes you're dishing out and be like, yeah, this is actually really good. That's development. You just engaged in development. Okay. You're finding ways of agreeing on what's so great about this story, right? What's worth keeping? What's the whole grain of the idea that makes it so compelling for you to want to move forward with this, right? Like me, I'm working on a story about this guy who um, is lost on an island, and this isolation forces him to deal with the temptation he has in his life so that he can give his life to God. And so I compare this to Epiphany and baptism, which is why the island works so well as a location, right? So he can then, when he's trapped on this island, what can he do? He can go get baptized. He could do a lot. He can't get some food, but he can do lots of other stuff, right? So this is a perfect isolated environment between him and God. What's most important to you? If you're not going to survive by next month on this silly island, well, what's most important to you? What did you want to do in life? Right? This is often where many of us find ourselves in life. You don't have to be deserta on a desert island to feel isolated, right? But this island is that kind of symbol. It's the kind of symbol that we all feel when we feel trapped by something, right? So many of us have been this man deserted on an island, wondering, why did I get left here? Why does nobody care and save me? Where is God? Where's my food source? Why has the world failed me? I could die on this island. This is something we all have felt at some point, right? And and so I bring in metaphors of Christ in the 40 days of temptation. I bring in metaphors of the Garden of Eden, where Satan comes and he tempts man to turn from God. In this case, he tempts him to not turn to God, right? And make him believe that he doesn't need God. It's almost the same thing, really. But what's there for him? God is always there for him. So God can visit him, and he does so in many different ways, many manifestations, right? And at a certain point, what happens? He decides, oh, is he going to drown or is he going to be baptized? And what's the difference? Right? Because this is going from old life to new life. So I'm just engaging in development with you. That's all. I just engage with development. Now, if you want to respond and be like, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about that? Well, I got to have those answers for you. And where I don't have those answers, hey, I got to think about that. Right? Well, what about the color palette? It's black and white. Well, what about this? What about that? What about weather on the island? That could serve as a tool. That could serve as a symbol of something. Sure. Well, is he going to be left on the island? No, he's not. Because God does save us, doesn't he? So, um, and I was going to make it to where he comes right after he gets baptized. So, um, and yeah, he literally goes for 40 days without food. Because why? Because Jesus did the same thing. So, and because just like how God sent angels to minister him to him, he can send angels to minister to us. So it's just a symbol of how we have to go through things that Christ went through. And this is a great teaching tool for us. So that's just the upcoming project I have. There's other projects I could talk to you about, but I'm working on this one now and developing it, and so I should be ready and willing to talk about it, right? And so Thin Days is what it is. It makes you think of liminal spaces, and that's kind of what it is. And he's also getting a little bit thin there. But yeah, so you know, be ready and willing to meet people because you never know how people can help you. You really never know how you might affect people. If you're a storyteller and you're an artist, you should expect for your work to move people. And when it doesn't move people, think about that. If it's not moving people, like maybe you're doing something wrong. Maybe you need to work on your pitch a little bit more and move some people. Maybe you need to do like a campfire story where you're like making big shapes, putting shadows on the wall, and you're trying to move people in some way, right? That's a good exercise. Like if you have kids, read them a story from a book, right? See if you're moving your kids. See if your kids are listening. Are they listening to how I'm reading this, or are they bored? Why is that? Think about how some stories do that better than others. Try to emulate that same thing when you tell your stories. Because a pitch, when you're trying to sell your film to someone, you can't sell them all the imagery. You can't sell them every plot twist, right? The film's too long. You got to elevator pitch them in a way that's like a campfire story where it's big, it's bold. You're trying to get someone to feel something, right? You just engaged in development. Wow. You know? And so now you're learning how better to tell your story. And if you get some feedback, even better. Now you're learning how not to tell your story, right? I'll take note of that. They didn't like that. Huh. It doesn't mean you eliminate it entirely. You're taking note of that, right? This person might be wrong. Who knows? Or maybe you didn't deliver it correctly, but there's nothing wrong with that plot point or whatever, right? Maybe you just did something about it didn't capture somebody. Take note of that, right? So this is all how development works. It's just relationships. You're developing yourself as a filmmaker and artist. You're letting people know what's really important for this story to be successful. And that's letting you know what to focus on. And, you're being open to understand that goals, let's say it together, goals may include maximizing the potential for projects to reach people through crowdfunding and distribution, right? And understand, like after you put that first product out and maybe you've been successful, you might want to put a lot more out after that. Now you're getting Angel Studio stuff where it's like they start out with like a pilot and eventually it turns into they've gotten a whole series written and eventually and then they've got a film that they can put out as well. And then they've got all this merchandise on top of that. Like, remember that series, honey, the Homestead? I think
Yeah.
they even have two series with that. Not even just one series.
2 seasons?
Two series, different
Oh,
series. One of them is the actual narrative, the story, and the other one is like something about survival, prepping, homestead stuff. Almost like
like a
a
how-to.
yeah, or like a reality show where they're like showing people like, yeah, like a how to, like, here's how you can tomatoes or whatever, and here's how
Yeah.
you do this stuff, and here's how you do that. Running a farm or running a garden or what have you, or
Yep.
storing food and how do you do canning and stuff. Like that's pretty great. That's pretty useful actually,
Yeah.
you know. Um, so these are all just things to consider in order to maximize that potential. And if this is a really infectious story, who isn't going to want to help you with that? I mean, sure, there's people who aren't storytellers or whatever, and they're not filmmakers. But if they are, they're artists and filmmakers and they care about these things, like make friends with those people and keep developing your story with those kinds of people who get it, right? A lot of stuff people worry about, like, oh, but I don't want to share because of copyright and all. Most of that stuff is not something to worry about. Most of that stuff, just don't worry about it. Well, the thing I do to solve that problem, I make a first draft of it and then I copyright it and then I develop it. And I expect that that first draft is going to change. Right? It's just a first draft. I expect it's going to change after you enter into development. Guess what? Once you're done with development, then you copyright it again. Now you've got the finished version of it, and the first version of it is still protected. And you don't have to worry about anything. If you're developing it with people, also, you can have them sign a non-disclosure agreement, because what that really just does is project professionalism anyway. You know what you're doing, you know how to protect yourself. They are going to sign it if they are professional. If they complain and are like, oh, blah, 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 that's just because they're not professionals. They don't know what they're talking about. Anybody who's been a professional in this industry, you're perfectly willing to sign a non-disclosure agreement, because all it means is you respect the fact that they own this product and you can't use it. That's all it really means. You can't use it. So get ready to go into a conversation that's confidential. It's just a confidential conversation. You can't take stuff out of that conversation and use it however you want, like it's your own. So are you willing to do that? Okay, then sign the contract. What's the big deal? And guess what? You've just projected professionalism. You've just understood how the relationship works. And you stopped complaining like a weirdo. That's just weird. So be a professional, sign the contract, do development, learn a thing or two yourself about these things, how they work, and just be happy you were invited. Goodness gracious. Most people don't get invited to these things. Um, and they don't know how they work. And, be happy that you're part of this storytelling process. It's a beautiful process. Just to see these people maximizing that potential is great. It's really great. So, and I intend to reward people when they work with me like this. I really value people that really contribute, and I think that they deserve their paycheck. So, all right. What do you think, honey?
Mm-hmm.
Have we better fleshed out development? Is there anything that you can think of that we have not addressed yet with development? I don't know if there's a thing I haven't thought of. What do you think?
Nothing else can be said. It's all been said
It's all been
about
said.
development.
It's the definitive statements on film development have now been stated.
Hmm.
Nothing more need be said.
I feel very informed.
That's it. It's been done. It is finished. No, I'm sure there's more that could be said. In fact, there was that book that I mentioned, The Indie Film Hustle. There's good stuff in there. And that's not even necessarily about film development as much as it is about the maximizing financial potential, right? Like creating different products, like going on podcasts, talking about your film, selling digital copies of your film, writing a book about it, making a comic book about it, blah, 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 other products, etc., etc. Right? That's basically what it was. And there's other books about this too that, you know, are useful. So, love you guys. I appreciate you hearing me out and enjoying talking about the subject because it's just one of my favorite subjects. And I will help almost anybody develop their film. Contact me. It's just great stuff. And
John, where can people read those spiffy articles that you were talking about
oh
earlier on in
yes,
the episode?
there were some spiffy articles. Yeah, on MediaMoses.com, you can find those articles. We put out Media Moses weekly on a weekly basis. Usually comes out Friday, which gives a breakdown of all of our best stories of the week. And you can find me also on YouTube at Culture Warfare with Jon Croft. You can find me on X at John Edward Croft and the Media Moses. And what about you, Rebecca? Where can people find you?
You can find me on YouTube at Rebecca Loves Jesus, and you can find me on Facebook at Rebecca Loves Jesus and Substack,
Substack.
Rebecca Croft.
That's right, Substack. And in fact, before
Yes,
I go, I've got this Substack I'm creating called Creator
your
Coffee
coffee
Bar.
talk.
And it's a coffee bar because what I want to do is talk with creators and filmmakers and stuff about making more film. It's going to be a networking meeting and we're going to have coffee while we talk. And I'm going to make you some coffee
It's backwards. Sorry.
at a coffee bar. No, it doesn't have to be a bar, but it's like, it's like we're going to a coffee bar and talking amongst creators about the creator.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. And I tell you how I brew my coffee and I make special coffee for you. So that's gonna be what it is, I think. And I've started the Substack, and I think maybe have one or two articles on there, something like that. And maybe if you're local, we you could even come to our meeting. We're planning on having the first meeting next month, so uh, we're gonna enjoy it. Enjoy some coffee, talking development if we can. All right, guys. It's been another week. Hope you enjoy the weekend and stand up for the culture. And I'll see you next week.